weeks, this will actually be up on a YouTube page for you to go back and review at your leisure. Let's go into session 4. We're at 20 after. Any questions, comments directed toward Ryan?
Oh yeah. I'm with Larry. You know, we need to learn. This is a big time learning curve.
You were pondering something earlier. I don't know if we got to it. Did it leave you?
Oh, I'm pondering lots of things.
Okay, good.
Well,
Good.
only thought that I keep coming back to, and it's something I've read articles and heard on the TV a lot lately, is the word science.
Yeah.
Right? And that back when I went to school in the 50s, science was sort of it didn't have, it just meant some search for the truth.
Yeah.
Now it's become, no, science needs to control everything.
Mm-hmm.
It is the, it's the non-biblical
Yeah.
worldview.
It is.
And that,
Can be.
science needs to tell us when we can go back to school, science needs to tell us when we can, anything and everything.
Mhm.
It's become a sort of spiritual world.
Yeah.
Science tells us that the climate's changing. Science tells us that, whatever. And so it's become a much stronger word. And I would use that as a substitution for your word of non-biblical worldview.
Yeah. In fact, by its own definition, science is now no longer how do we experiment and find the truth, but how do we define and tell you what the truth already is.
Yeah.
That science has transferred from experimental now to declarative.
Well, you go back to what you talked about earlier with
Yeah.
the academia.
Yeah.
You go find some PhD from MIT,
Yeah.
Harvard,
Mhm.
and suddenly he's God. He
Yeah.
declares the truth.
Yep.
And that's what we're supposed to go with, even if it doesn't make any sense at all.
And I would even make the case that, 2 Timothy 4:13, in the last days men will abandon the truth and embrace godless myths.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go here. This is, we are on the front edge of the world where we are no longer post-Christian, but we are rather pre-pagan.
Yeah.
And science, the scientific academic community, is defining for us, because it's based in a religion without a God, then you can pick anything you want to worship, and we're okay with it, as long as it's not the God of the Bible. You know?
For sure.
And I would say this crazy thing. A religion without a God that's founded in godless myths will probably one day tell somebody, well, if you actually believe in the God of the Bible, there is something physiologically, mechanically, psychologically wrong with you. And because you're not like us and we're a little bit more superior than you are, it's probably okay to help you go on in to see God.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. Hope I'm wrong. I don't think I am, because I think Scripture is pretty plain that these whole things transpire. Well, hey, let's go to Genesis 1:1. Okay, we're gonna take a look at Genesis 1:1-1:2 today. This is where I want to start shifting our worldview. And I'm going to add some wackadoodle to it, okay? You guys know Genesis 1:1. If I were to say, what's Genesis 1:1, you guys would say? Right, God created the heavens and the earth, right? We have usually no problem with this, right? Because we're eliminating the supernatural, oh, hey, we got to have universe or something like that you were talking about earlier, okay? Second thing is, let's go to verse 2, Genesis 1:2. Now the earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over what?
Surface.
The surface of what?
Deep.
The deep. This is a little crazy. And then what? Then what do we see going on at the end of verse 2?
Spirit
Spirit of God hovering over waters.
Over the waters. Yeah. I may be wrong. I really may be wrong. I've done a lot of due diligence and study on this crazy thing. Oh, the deeps just lost me. Anyway, sorry. It's just third time this week I've had to get into Hebrew, and I've got too many other crazy things going on there. Give me just a second. Okay, I'm not worried about it. Anyway, Hashemayim Ha'eret. We're going to take a look at deep and waters. It's right there on the tip of my tongue. I'm just going to have to apologize. It's just left me. Okay. Heavens. There's an old teaching in Jewish rabbinic teaching that says, if you understand what the letters mean, you can determine what the nature of the word means. Okay. This first one is ha. Take your hand. Ha. What do you feel when you say ha? Breath and hot, right? When you see the letter H, it's a ha. Shem. This is actually two letters. It's very reminiscent. It looks like RW, very reminiscent of RW. It is sin and shin. Anybody? Do we have any Star Trek fans here? Star Trek fans too. The rest of you, this will be lost on. Leonard Nimoy was a Jew, believe it or not, the actor Leonard Nimoy, and he was asked to come up with a sign for Vulcan. Okay, what's the Vulcan sign? We probably all know it, right?
Can't do
Something
it,
like
but I
can't
know
do
it.
it. Looks like this. Believe it or not, this right here, he got from Jewish mysticism, and this idea of sin and shin. And this crazy thing, let's go to the book of Acts, Acts chapter 2. The guys are upstairs. We hear the sound of a mighty rushing wind. And what appeared over their heads?
Fire.
Tongues of
Flames of fire. I can make a case from Jewish mysticism, a little strange, that this idea of sin and shin would have been a part of that fire. What are angels but his messengers? And they are flames of fire. Crazy, weird, wackadoodle stuff. We have the mem is, strangely enough, this letter M is the idea when it's like this. Ladies, I apologize. There are times that I will say this, make like a baby and head out. This is an idea of a womb. And a womb gives forth life. But what happens before a womb gives forth life? There's a physiological thing that happens, and it is what?
Conception.
No. Yes, but a little bit closer to the birth procedure. I was downstairs. My wife was 9 months pregnant. She slipped down the stairs. She's holding a glass of water. And I come around the corner after hearing her slip down the stairs, and I see water all over the floor. What am I thinking? Her water broke. Strange thing. And when water is joined, strangely enough, with water, we have a breath of fire, and this thing of life happens. I'm going to make the case that from the Hebrew letters themselves, the idea of heavens is spiritual life. Ha'eretz, this is kind of strange. This is the idea that there is a divine first thought, and I'm going to do it a little bit better. Hebrew letter, tss, that's how it's tade, something like that. If I were to draw something green around it,
It's a tree.
it's a tree.
Broccoli.
It's a tree.
Broccoli's good.
The idea in the Hebrew language is that this is the stuff that trees grow out of. I don't know what to call it, but we're going to call it this. Yeah, it's the stuff that trees grow out of. This is a little bit crazier. Let's just think about this idea of deep, okay? Now darkness was over the surface of the deep. What happens after a funeral? We go, where do we go after?
Graveside burial.
We go to the graveside. What do we do at the graveside?
Bury the body.
We bury the body. It's the idea of 6 foot under, right? Close enough? Isn't it strange that we have always done this? Buried the dead? Have you ever heard kids talk about death and where they don't want to say the word hell because mom and dad will spank them? So what do they say? I don't want to go to the bad place, right? And where always is the bad place besides Shoe Carnival? We point where? Down. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
We point down. We call it the bad place. We don't want to go there. Waters. I'm going to make this case here. Have you ever had something unexpected happen in your world?
Never.
Right? Right?
Oh, heavens.
No, waters. Evans is up here. We're in waters, dear. Okay.
Well.
What happens when you flush the toilet? Just curious.
It swirls in a circle.
Has your life ever felt like, right? Where I will occasionally get notes on my phone that there are tropical depressions out in the middle of the ocean. What happens when a tropical depression happens out in the ocean?
Causes cyclonic action.
Yeah. And what happens when those things make landfall?
They cause tornadoes.
Destruction.
Destruction.
Tornadoes.
Here's the bad place.
Yeah.
You're not too far wrong.
I'm going to make this case real quick. There was a point in time when Jesus was out on a boat and he was asleep. And there was a huge, humongous storm that the guys who were professional fishermen and had grown up on boats were afraid of. And they woke Jesus up and said, "What in the world are you doing?" I said, "But don't you really care if we're about ready to die?" And what does Jesus do? He stands up and says, what 2 words? Peace, be still. And what happened? The wind and the waves obeyed him. And Jesus brought peace. Follow this idea so far? Okay? This is something that you've probably not heard being taught very often. We're gonna link some of this stuff here in session 6 coming up here in just a little bit. Our big problem in our church, big problem in our world, okay, is that we have eliminated in our education system everything but this. We don't want to talk about the deep. We don't want to talk about cake. You can turn the news on and see chaos and destruction. We know death happens every day. We don't really want to deal with these things, so we just really want to focus in on this thing. And here's something that happens, okay, is that we have a new generation, people who are millennial age and younger, have never been taught these things. Okay, first thing is that there is a supernatural. They have grown up in an American education system. Why should I believe God? God's a, you know? Why should I believe it? That's kind of weird. I just want to focus in on it. There's no supernatural. Here's another thing that they're not taught, is that there's judgment for sin. Well, no, it can't really be sin because there's not really God, so it's not really judgment. Have you seen the happy-go-lucky, Jesus-only Bible things? There's no judgment for sin. We want to keep Jesus off the cross as much as possible.
If sin's what I decide it is, then I don't have to worry about it.
Exactly. That's where our world's living, you know? And because there's judgment for sin, here's something else that they don't understand, is that you can find purification. I would make this case that what we're seeing move through our culture in the Marxist communist ideas that's right now being marketed as Black Lives Matter. Here's my thing, Black lives do count. I've got black friends. They're good people. Some of my best friends. Here's the problem. We're trading that out. And people are trying to find purification by letting me stand up for a different course of justice. And the problem is that no matter how many people Marxism or communism or academic ideology will kill, you don't get purification that way. Our world doesn't understand purification. And then here's this last thing here that's on our page. The world used to be better than it is now. They've never been taught these things. They've never been taught these things. So here's this thing, okay, about this idea of the deep. Let's hop over. Okay, so here's what I've done. This entire section here has to do with ideas of heavens and the deep. We got Genesis 7:11. This is just right before the flood. On that day, all the springs of the great deep burst forth. We understand that there's water that came up out of here. There's a bunch of crazy. We have Genesis 11:4. This is the idea of the Tower of Babel. So come, let us build ourselves a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we can make a name for ourselves. Okay. Let's see how many nerds we have. I think I'm close. Anybody know what science fiction series this is from? I think I'm really close.
Star Trek.
Close.
Stargate.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Stargate.
Stargate. Little crazy thing. And maybe it's actually like this, but Stargate. It's something like that. What's the idea of Stargate? That we kind of found this thing that we can go to different, travel through and go to different places. I don't think they were just trying to make a really tall tower. Have you seen some of the weird research that came out on the pyramids? Well, they're trying to point something to Orion or trying to get something back from there. There's a whole bunch of weird. It got said, oh, by the way, guys, we're going to shut that down. Exodus 20:11, for in 6 days God made the heavens and the earth and the sea. We have the sea shown up here, and all that is in them. Interesting. He rested there on the seventh day. What doesn't show up in verse 11 of Exodus chapter 20? Because the way he created it, it didn't have death. Just something to ponder as you start looking through.
Because sin hadn't been introduced yet.
Because sin hadn't been introduced yet. Very good. Very good. This gets really, really bizarre. This next passage out of Deuteronomy chapter 4. Be careful not to forget the covenant of the Lord your God that He has made with you. Do not make yourselves what? An idol. Do not do this. Because it says here, for your Lord God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. After you've had children and grandchildren, you've lived in the land for a long time, if you become corrupt and make any kind of idol, doing evil in the eyes of the Lord your God and arousing His anger, who are the witnesses that God is going to call to testify for Himself in verse 26?
The heavens and the earth.
God said, you know what? Did this thing that you think you want to worship make these two places? These two places are going to be my witnesses that I'm the one who did this greater than anything else you want to worship. Here's the crazy thing. Let's think about the Ten Commandments.
You've got an entry here that on session 4 it says
Please.
the deep God planned for death and redemption.
Uh-huh. Isn't that crazy?
He already planned for it.
Oh, isn't that weird? He's already...
But we had to commit sin first to experience death.
Yeah. Isn't that bizarre? He puts in place this idea of, you know what, death is going to occur. And this is hard, man. This is why there's a lot of pulpits that don't understand this. And I want to say this, I don't think I'm wrong, but I'm willing to die on this hill. Okay, I really am willing to die on this hill. And here's why. If God's going to use the church to be the witnesses to these other supernatural beings, and it has to do with our being redeemed, it has to do with the death of Jesus Christ at the center of that, then He's already made a place for death to occur. My guess is you've never heard anything crazy like this taught. No. Okay. This is where we're going to expand some of these things. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff here that I've put into this section. I want to challenge you to, and I've got my notes here. Okay, it is something here just to kind of think about, just to really kind of work your way through. Is when you read these things, if we read them through a different lens, a subtly different lens on the heavens, the earth, and the deep, and the waters, it starts changing how it is that we start dealing with that. Ryan, I'm probably going to jump ahead here for just a second.
You're fine.
Okay. Yep. Let's go to Revelation 20. Because I can tell that I've got the wheels turning. Okay. Let's go to Revelation 20, verse 11. Okay. I saw a great white throne and Him who is seated on it. What fled from His presence? The order is reversed.
Mm-hmm.
Just something to note. The order's reversed. there was no place for them. I saw the dead. I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and the books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. The dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books. Verse 13. What do we see here? The sea gave up the dead that was in them. And they were judged according to what they had done. Now watch this, verse 14. What happens? You guys have it there.
Death and Hades were
Death
thrown
and
into
hell.
the lake of fire.
I'm going to make this case that in a Jewish construct, this place, because it's now back empty, can absolutely be destroyed. Because everything in it has now been judged. While he prepared for it in the beginning, he gets rid of this. That's really, really cool. Let's go on now. If anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Verse 1 of Revelation 21, what do we see? A new heaven and a new earth. And guess what?
The order is back to creation.
Order is back to creation. What happens at the end of verse 1, Revelation 21?
They passed away.
Yep, the old ones have passed away, but what happened? There's now no longer any
sea.
Water.
There's now no longer any sea. Watch what happens here. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband, and with a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now amongst the people. He will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eye. There will be no more what? Death? No more death. No more pain. Why? Because the old order of things is done. I want to make this case. If we understand a Jewish construct of a Jewish cosmology, at the fulfillment of these things, God promises this. There's no more death. Now, most of us are pretty happy just to deal with that. How would you like to have this one more thing added? There's no more chaos or destruction. You want to sign up for that?
Woo-hoo.
I do.
Mm-hmm.
You know what the millennial mind has a problem with? Because we have kind of lost this a little bit. I don't know. I don't know that I want to go to heaven. This has got to be a little bizarre. How do we teach this to our kids? What happens when we die? If you're a good person, guess what? Where do you get to go when we die? We somehow go to heaven. Do you know what heaven is marketed to the millennial? How many pastors have you ever heard this? Oh, this is just going to be a great time because we just go worship for God forever, and it's going to be like a great big worship service. That's why what prophets will be there.
They don't even know who that is. The millennials.
No, but here's the problem. In an Acts 17 world, I like singing, but I don't want to sing forever. They cannot wrap their head around a heaven of worship because we really have no great explanation for what heaven is. And we go to that. Strange thing is, that's not what Revelation says. Look at verse 3. Who's doing the moving?
God's always done the moving.
God's always done the moving.
He did it with Abraham in the promise.
Yeah.
Abraham didn't even really need to be there.
He dwells with us. Can I make this case? if we were to start being able to teach this from Genesis 1 and into Revelation 20 and Revelation 21, I would make this case. Islam has 72 virgins. There are some guys that will sign up for that. Can I say it that way?
They don't declare themselves, though,
No, I have 72 virgins.
which is, there's no sexuality declared.
Mormons will say, guess what?
Oh, I know.
You and all of your wives get to go populate your own planet.
Your family,
Isn't that a good thing? Isn't that weird?
become your own God.
You get to become your own God. Here's the crazy thing. God dwells with us. Can you imagine a new heaven and a new earth where cars don't break down?
That's awesome.
Where I don't break a femur and have to learn how to walk again?
No disease, no death.
No aging
No
process.
chaos.
No chaos. No, yeah. You know what? I can sign up for that place.
Shoot.
Can you imagine what happens when God comes by every now and again and says, hey, how's it going? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for Jesus. Thank you for redoing this whole thing, getting rid of these places and moving in with me. I would make this case. The word Emmanuel. What does the word Emmanuel mean? Oh, wait a second. Isn't this confirmed? He dwells with us. And imagine how cool this was the first time around. How better will this be without all this stuff going on? It's a pretty amazing place for me.
I have a question.
Yes,
Probably
please.
stupid. Well, I have kids and they ask me about this a lot, so, you know, explaining it to them, would you say, instead of saying like, cause we just went to a funeral and of course they were asking about this, so instead of being like, they go to heaven, would you say, well, now God is with them, or how would you explain that to a young child? Is that a bad question?
No,
No,
it's not.
it's a great question.
It's not. How I say this is that we have fundamentally dumbed it down to get here. We really have. And here's the thing that I would try to teach a young child, okay? Because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, he's the firstborn. We get resurrected into a new heaven and a new earth. God's already defined the playing field. And guess what? He's already defined it as well. You know what? You're not going to fall and bump your knee. Your little heart isn't going to get hurt. Because we have to answer, where's grandma? He's going to wipe those tears away. Doesn't mean that there's no crying. He's going to wipe them away. We're going to carry some sadness from this world into the next one. And I can't wait to see God say, you know what, Larry? It's okay, buddy. The old order of things have gone. God's moved in with you.
Praise God.
You follow what I'm trying to say? Our churches aren't teaching this.
No.
Because we don't grasp some of this wackadoodle weird theology. And it's hard to grasp. I just want to make the case that in this passage here, there's a lot of crazy things. This is out of this last one here, right before session 5. This is out of Isaiah 44. Let's pick up Isaiah 44. Is that right? Did I lose something there? No, I didn't. We're good. Let's pick up in verse 24. This is what the Lord says, your Redeemer who formed you in the womb. I am the Lord, maker of all things, who stretches out the heavens, who spreads out the earth by myself, who foils the signs of false prophets, who makes fools of diviners, who overthrows the learning of the wise and turns it into nonsense. Guess what is going to happen with a non-biblical worldview? God's going to straighten all that out. Who carries out the words of his servants and fulfills the predictions of his messengers, who says to Jerusalem, it shall be inhabited, of the towns of Judah, they shall be rebuilt, and of their ruins I will restore them. Verse 27, what does it say?
As to the watery deep, be dry.
And what?
I will dry it for streams.
I'm gonna make this case. I'm doing model airplanes. I've got a friend by the name of Leor, who lives 20 miles north of Jerusalem, who flies model airplanes out on an old abandoned farm road. And I get to see pictures of him flying about every Saturday, which is really strange. Tells me he's probably not practicing.
Not practicing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, I got Saturday off, I'm gonna go fly model airplanes. Can I make this case? There was a point in time when that area wasn't inhabited. And in our world, 1942, 1948, I guess, the whole thing changed. It's kind of bizarre. And he says, oh, wait, by the way, the watery deep here, I'm going to dry it up. I'm going to make this case. Verse 27 here. God's giving a little hint, hiding it in plain sight. At the culmination of these things won't be happening. We want to say, oh, well, that's just flowery language, isn't really nice. But then he says here in verse 28, who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and I will accomplish all that I please. He will say of Jerusalem, let it be rebuilt, and of the temple, let its foundations be laid. And this is 400 years before a guy by the name of Cyrus showed up and actually did this.
And actually did it.
And I'll make this case. Because God said Cyrus is going to rebuild Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. Guess what? God's saying, I'm going to redo this too. It's a rebuilding passage. Crazy wackadoodle theology. Think about that crazy stuff. I'll let you jump into some of those crazy things. Let me deal with one last thing here. First commandment. Anybody know your first commandment?
You shall have no other gods.
Yeah. Say it out loud for us.
You shall have no other gods before me.
You shall have no other gods before me. Why does God need to say that if in our American naturalistic culture there are no other gods to put before him?
Because we're idolaters.
Because there was guys.
Yeah.
Can I challenge you? There are.
Yeah, all of them are.
It's
Good past tense, but-
it is subtle because
Yeah.
because our American churchianity bent is to put things in the past. Oh, we're now educated. I don't have to believe that stuff anymore. Yeah, there are, and they work.
Oh, yeah. That's why as Christians we're considered dumb.
Sheep.
Yeah. Well, are,
I mean,
but, yeah.
I've had an old farmer friend of me said, Larry, you have no idea as a pastor how absolutely stupid sheep are.
They are.
And that's the best picture that Jesus can come up with us. We will follow whatever's in front of our eyes right off the edge of the cliff. We'll get lost. Anyway, thanks for your time on that. That's a little deep, a little crazy. Maybe
Yeah,
expand your boundaries a little bit.
What's crazy is in that Revelation 21, as we're going through that, talking about the new heaven and the new earth, as you go a little bit farther, and you get into verse 6,
Yeah.
he's speaking to the writer of Revelation, John. He says it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega. And it's almost like John finally saw it, the completion.
Yeah.
From Genesis to now Revelation, and God sees that, he looks at him and he says, I am the Alpha and the Omega. Like I planned this before it started. I'm the beginning and I am the end. It's done. So it's almost like, that's where he had his own revelation about the completion process.
Yeah.
It's hard to accept that when God built all this, he already built a place for us to die when there was no sin. And he said it was very good. It was perfect. Why would he build a place for failure? It's because God is not, he's all knowing. But he knew this was going to happen before it happened. He wasn't surprised by sin. It was all pre-planned and ordained, just like us sitting in this room right now. Everything is planned.
Yeah.
Well, just part of the process that we should be happy we're involved in.
Sovereignty.
Yes.
Oh,
Amen.
and you can see just a little bit into the window of when we've lost our biblical authority, how much we've lost.
Oh, yeah.
And imagine what would happen if our Sunday schools, and our churches, and our pews understood even just a glimpse of some of these crazy things we're talking about tonight and tomorrow. We would revolutionize the church. I mean, God would do it.
The church.
Yeah, the church, not churchianity.
No.
The church. Session 5. Hey, if you need a break, let's take 2 or 3 minutes here.